Good afternoon and welcome everyone, ladies and gentlemen, to this. This is now the latest edition of MIDF Conversations, a series brought to you by MIDF, brought to your screens, and really where we try to put in front of you every couple of weeks, leading personalities to cover current issues and even topics such as touching on public policy and leadership perspectives. Just as a bit of background, some of the names which have appeared on MIDF Conversations over the past few months. And if you haven't watched this or you've missed any of this, you can view the recordings on our YouTube channel. So some of these have included, for example, Dato Sri Amir Hamzah, Professor Dato Adiba Kamaruzaman, Jalil Rashid, Adrian Ong, and most recently, Tan Sri Jeffrey Chia. But today, for your lunchtime treat, to take you away from the hours of video calls and virtual meetings, we are excited to have with us Yang Berbahagia Dato Dr. Hartini Zainudin, a renowned activist on women's and children's issues, and she has been involved in this line for more than 20 years. Her CV goes on, and including that she was a co-founder of Yayasan Chow Kit, and this is a 24-hour crisis care center for neglected and abused and very poor children in the heart of KL, and is doing a great work there. And she was also the founder of Voice of the Children, and here she is, Tini. So let me just go on for a bit more, just a little bit more. And she was also very recently appointed to the National Recovery Council by the then Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin. So, but of course, I will be talking to her about these and more as we go on later. And just also setting the scene, I want to remind everyone here, ladies and gentlemen, that we always welcome questions and comments from the audience. You can click on the Q&A button on your screen, a box will pop up in to type in your questions there. But anyway, Tini is here. I don't want to keep her waiting. So let's rock and roll. Welcome, Tini.
Hi, Farouk. How are you? It's nice to meet you.
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks. Thanks, Tini. So, first of all, just to tell you that we have a very encouraging crowd here watching us this afternoon. And I'm told that it's a mix of people from various parts of society, including students. I think it's very good to hear to have them with us. Students from let me look at this, from UM, UKM, USM, and even UNIMAS. So thanks very much to everyone here. And I believe also part of the audience from your fan base. The 10,600 Twitter followers. I have to repeat this, ladies and gentlemen, 10,600 Twitter followers.
So, very small, very small.
But it's so difficult. Tini, and actually I must put up front, I hope you don't mind me addressing you as Tini on screen. So it's so difficult to catch up with what you're doing. You were in Sabah over the weekend, you came back, you self-quarantined, now back to work non-stop, and so on and so forth. So, but I think we'll talk about this later. I mean, it's just your I don't know where to start with this conversations thing, but maybe let's do something easy.
Okay.
Let's do something easy. And we'll start with, how has the COVID-19 crisis impacted your work? Whether this is on the child welfare side, else.
Sure. Most of the work that I've done, most of my life is really around, as you said, child protection, child services, looking at ways to uphold child rights. But the pandemic has, as many people know, sort of highlighted the gaps in the social protection spectrum. In whether you look at child rights, or you look at single mothers, or you look at the poor, you look at marginalized groups, what it's done is actually highlighted the gaps in the social protection issues, and sort of forced us, people, I think, in the social protection, humanitarian field, and the economy, etc., and stuff, to be able to sort of re-examine, re-look, take stock, and see ways in which we can better serve and support those in need. And support those in need has sort of multiplied and sort of, become a bigger issue. I think the numbers yesterday in the newspaper was quite staggering, about how many people have fallen through the cracks because of the pandemic. So it's looking at what we can do better, how we can do it better, and how we can do it together, collectively. It's made work, I think, in many ways more difficult, but at the same time, I think it's provided opportunities for us as Malaysians, us as people, and representatives from the different sectors to find different ways and invigorating, innovative ways to look at addressing the issues and helping those in need. But again, having said that, the reason why I was in Sabah, for example, is because I had, we've been working with marginalized groups for 18 months since the pandemic started, and I needed to see for myself, and dragged my friends along, how we could do and to connect with local actors and stakeholders who actually have been working around the clock, who don't get, I think, as much sort of, not highlights, but don't get as much focus as they should, because a lot of people, a lot of players, people, and most people, other people in other states don't know. And I think it's important to sort of address, highlight, and respect and focus on what they're doing, and to give them the support and help they need. So that's why I went to Sabah, and that's what I think the pandemic has done. It's sort of highlighted, focused, and sort of pivoted a lot of the work that we do, and it's not, we cannot do the same old anymore. Cannot. It's hard.
So definitely, as you said, I mean, the scope has increased because people are falling through the cracks, situation is worse, and livelihoods have become more difficult, for example. But you say it provides opportunities for people to get more involved. Are Malaysians stepping up?
Yes, I think what has happened is that the government and the GLCs can't do as much as they can, because the issues are so many and it's enormous. So what's happened is the communities and the neighborhoods and the civil society has had to step up and fill in the gaps quickly, right? You can't have this many people hungry. You can't have this many people losing their jobs. You can't have this many people needing school. You can't have this many students not in school for almost 2 years. So civil society, neighborhoods, organizations, NGOs, and grassroots basically has had to step up to try to figure out innovative ways to get the support and services to those in need. And mental health. Mental health, for example, is something that hasn't been highlighted as much as it has in the last 18 months because of what's happening. So yeah, I think it's changed. The landscape has changed.
I mean, it's not just money, as you said, right? I'm sure it's also time and innovative ways. Can you give a couple of examples of
innovative ways? The fact that we have food banks in petrol stations, I think, is one. The fact that my friend's mother is going around feeding 5,000 people a week, right? Organizing neighborhood watches to get restaurant owners and chefs and people who work in the service industry part-time jobs to be able to cook and serve others while they get paid, yes, smaller amounts, but get paid to do work so that they have some kind of income. My mother's friend, my friend's mother, so there's lots of stakeholders now that weren't there 18 months ago who are stepping up to the plate and doing it better than many of us in the system. And it's sort of shaken us, I think, a little bit in a good way to re-examine how we do things and to do things better, faster, efficiently, and well. So, it's painful and it's scary what's going on, seeing what I saw in Sabah. But at the same time, it's a mix of feelings, because I think it's also, like I said, invigorating and exciting, because you're looking at new approaches and new ways to address old issues. And, accountability. So if you don't step up, we will. That's really what we're saying, right? As civil society and people on the ground.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you don't step up, we will. I mean, And because I was wondering, you know, how with the restricted mobility, you know, you used to be able to travel around the country, you know, chasing babies, for example, saving families and things. So now that with the restrictions in place, are you still able to do that, or now are you now depending on pockets of communities around the country to step up in your place?
You know, if you ask me about the work that I do in child protection and child rights, 2005, and you know, we're talking about 2021, it's different. Yeah, I'm not going around looking through garbage dumps and looking at holes in the walls for children sleeping there. Things have improved in a lot of ways, but because, you know, we have more players, we have more stakeholders, we have more NGOs, we have more, you know, public awareness about the issues that weren't really highlighted 15, 16 years ago. So more players are doing the same work, and I think doing it better in many circumstances. That's one. Number two, I think the fact that there is accountability because there is awareness is something where we're having more conversations and more demands for conversations and discussions around issues that we've worked on for, you know, 15, 20 years. So, you know, the issue on statelessness, looking at different categories, looking at single mothers, looking at mothers whose children are born abroad, for example, in Langford's cases. I mean, these were things that were around for a long, long time, even before I came on the scene. But now there is accountability. Now we're having open discussions. Now we go to court. Now we do, you know, we look at different avenues to be able to address the issues to ensure that more kids, more children, more people actually have their rights returned to them or upheld. So I think in many ways things have improved in many ways, but I think the sad part is that we're still talking about the same issues.
Yeah. Maybe again, I'm sure this is an issue from the past as well about you know, orphans, for example. You see, you know, maybe of course things have moved on from 20 years ago, but then and linking this back to the current pandemic situation, when if parents dying of, you know, causes related to the disease, for example.
Yeah.
And you know, this was recently talked about also by, I think, some of the politicians as well. So I mean,
what are we doing?
It's an old issue. I'm sure people have been dying in the
but
past.
So many, right? 4,000 plus orphans are made orphans by COVID-19, where both parents or one or both parents died. Yeah, so we're looking at different ways of approaching the issue, looking at our current child protection system and looking at alternative childcare and ways in which to address the issue. I think, you know, many of the alternatives that we're looking at and discussing are on community-based type of programs where, you know, we look at ways in which to support family members whose nephew, niece, or someone, one of these kids who've been made orphan by COVID-19, get to stay with them, looking at, you know, things that we have but maybe not implemented well, like foster care, looking at community-based shelters, maybe smaller, looking at deinstitutionalizing of homes, trying to figure out how to make sure they have online access to education, who supports them, whether they have access to mental health and stuff. These are things where, again, as I alluded to earlier, we need to look at a multi-pronged approach to addressing any issue, right? So it's not one organization looking at foster care. I mean, I've just tabled, in fact, today at 3 o'clock, I actually have a meeting with potential donors who want to look at funding this foster care system change to be able to have this advocacy platform, to look at ways to address this foster care thing that we need for these 4,000 orphans, right? And we need to move fast. Where are these kids going? Where are they staying? Who are they staying with? How do we support them? How do we make sure they're safe? How do we know that they're eating well? You know, we've got kids living at home by themselves. So, you know, it's a couple of things. There is an urgency to wanting to address the issue. There's the fact that we need to do it right. So we have to have a conversation, the fact that we need to do needs analysis for risk assessment, looking at things, you know, talking to donors. These are things that, you know, so many of us are discussing as a whole, a collective, in terms of looking at child protection, or, you know, things I've picked up. So I'm interested in foster care. I'm interested in looking at alternative community-based care for children, including alternative to detention for children. I am interested in looking at the 4,000 children made orphans, but there are people better than me doing the same work, just from different angles. But I think as long as we communicate with one another, as long as we engage with the government and the ministries that are supposed to be addressing these issues, and as long as we hold them accountable, I think the conversation will go further than just talking about, oh my God, this is horrifying. We have 4,000 children made orphans, right? We wring our hands and, you know, say, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, and we do nothing. So now we don't do nothing. We take action. We actually do something. We do it at, you know, we understand the issue. We have a certain sense of urgency, and we go get it done, because it's not about us, right? It's about the children. So it's a priority, and it's about time, you know, children were made a priority in this country. Really, you know, they shouldn't always have to be in crisis before we highlight an issue. But that's Mila saying.
I mean, it's good to hear that, you know, moving in and your ideas around communities and foster care, as opposed to just throwing them into the system. So there is, at the end of the tunnel, however dim, there is light, and hopefully we are getting there. Yeah. I mean, of course, Tini, you have a seat on the National Recovery Council.
Yes.
And congratulations. I mean, of course, this is validation of your work and your involvement in welfare issues and people, all of this one. But from your view, what can the NRC do? What can the NRC do more? You know, I mean, you talk about children being priority. How can we prioritize children, or where should our priorities be?
Well, our next National Recovery Council meeting is on Monday, and we've only had one National Recovery Council meeting as a group. I think the government had a council meeting, a first meeting prior to that. So this is the Monday's meeting will be the third, and I believe that the issue on children is actually going to come up in terms of opening schools, but I'm not sure. I haven't seen the agenda. Yeah, I think, you know, part of the reason, which I thought was very brave of Country Muhyiddin actually, was to get me to be on the council, because I have such a big mouth, right? And so I thought it was very brave that he had me there. And, you know, and the fact that I am a child activist. So I'm hoping this means that, you know, child rights issues and programs will be there, and that it will be a top priority, not just in terms of, you know, opening schools or access to education, but also looking at better ways of looking at maternal health or infant mortality or children under 5, looking at statelessness or, you know, access to education, access to health. You know, so, you know, I always try to, when I say always, it was one time, actually do when any other matters come out at the end of the 3-hour session, I always bring up something, right? So yeah, so I'm hoping that this meeting on Monday, I get to talk about poverty and food and malnourishment. So
food distribution, right? Because I'm sure we have a lot of food. There's still a lot of wastage going around. It's just,
I think you need to look at the whole spectrum on food distribution, which for me is new, yeah. Because yes, I have a soup kitchen in Chow Kit and we have all these things, right? But you can't even begin to understand the impact on having no food and malnourishment, right? Because it leads to a whole slew of other, you know, health issues. You got scabies, you got TB. TB isn't because of malnourishment, but scabies is. The fact that you have maternal health and mothers can't breastfeed and you're giving milk powder, right? Which, you know, is a no-no, but there's no choice. And the fact that, you know, it blows your perception in terms of saying, oh, kalau kat kampung, you know, you can tanam sayur and you can cook. I'm like, tanam sayur takes time, yeah? What do you do in the meantime while the vegetables are growing? You know, oh, boleh petik, you know, sayur-sayuran kat tepi longkang. I'm like, yeah, that's all buta already, right? Because everybody had the same idea. There's no more vegetables. So, and then again, the whole spectrum on food distribution looks at food security and food sovereignty as well, and being able to create jobs in the agricultural business to be able to ensure that communities actually are self-reliant, and creating ecosystems around the fact that, you know, we're talking about resilience here. And so we've moved from food distribution, food security, food sovereignty to ecosystems of self-reliance and self-sustainability. And it's a slew of other things. It's malnutrition, it's access to health, it's access to education, it's low-cost housing, it's, you know, wash programs with water and sanitation things. There's no clean water, there are no toilets, houses are falling apart. This is what you saw in Sabah, right? We went in for food distribution. So again, you have to drag in all the different stakeholders I would never in a million years engage with. Religious departments, religious organizations, community leaders. We say this, but we don't do it. And then getting them to lead, because it's about them investing in their own community, them investing in their own couple, which is very, very bottoms up, not top down. And this is how policies, I think, and rules and regulations get thrown out the window, because the community decides what they want and what they need, not us assuming. But we can have those different pillars, the maternal health, access to schools, the food, and all that kind of stuff, right? And it can be still food focused, but there's a whole slew of other things and a whole spectrum from A to Z that has to be in place for this community to thrive. Everybody's like, oh, you know, there's malnourishment and malnutrition in that kampung already. Yeah, but we made it 100 times worse with the pandemic. What do? Did you address the root cause? Now's the time. And that's when I say that's the exciting, invigorating opportunities that I talked of, to really get to the root cause of what went wrong and fixing it. So,
yeah. Wow. As you were, you know, talking about the malnutrition and scabies and so on, I'm just thinking that you know, we need some kind of, you know, as they have a Gini coefficient for difference in wealth. Maybe we need something for how food is accessible and affordable, you know, in different parts of the countries. Because I'm sure there are other parts of Malaysia where obesity, children.
We're double-barreled.
Children,
we're a double-barreled country.
Yeah.
We have obesity and we have malnourishment, both. Malaysia. So, yes. You know, if you talk to any UN organization, you talk to UNICEF, they will tell you Malaysia has a double-barreled issue and double, whatever the word is. I think it's double-barreled. So you have malnutrition, at the same time you've got obesity.
Bipolar. Yeah.
Oh. So it's a malnutrition issue.
Okay, so Tini, maybe because I'm seeing there are a few questions coming up on screen already, but maybe I just want to change tack for a while and maybe go a bit personal if you don't mind. Then
okay, sure.
Just tell us your story, because I'm sure that, you know, from the personal interest side, I mean, you completed your degrees and your doctorate in the US, but this was in the education field. You know, how do you find yourself, you know, where you are now? I mean, in speaking up on children's rights and women's issues.
So as a child, I've always wanted to be a teacher since I was 6 years old. And the reason I wanted to be a teacher was because I was the student that was always getting into trouble. And so I decided at 6 that I was going to be a better teacher than the teacher who always scolded me because I was always doing something wrong in class, right? So I was the naughtiest kid in school, in it, like and kind. That was me. So I always wanted to be a teacher. But then when I had an opportunity to do my teacher education certificate in America, the first thing I realized very quickly on the first day of teaching in a classroom in Washington Heights was that kids weren't going to learn if they were hungry. Kids were not going to learn if parents were not around, or that they were the oldest at 14 taking care of 3 other siblings at home because the father had died and the mother was in prison or doing drugs. And so for me, and I've always been this kind of person now, you know, everybody says I wear my heart on my sleeve, blah, blah, blah. I get emotionally invested because that's how it has to make sense. It has to make meaning, and that's where my passion comes from, right? So for me, the work that I did, my doctorate, etc. and stuff, didn't have much relevancy to the practical reality that I saw every day. And then, of course, I was also very, very bored of just studying. And so I started volunteering in soup kitchens and shelters, in homeless shelters, and I did the Read to Me program in New York libraries and stuff, working up in East Harlem, etc. And it was very clear that education for many of the poor, and it's the same here, is a privilege. We say it's a basic right, but for the poor, especially now during the pandemic, if you don't eat, if you don't have a home over your head, if you're always worried that you're going to lose your money to pay rent, you're not going to school. That is a luxury. And so for me, if I wanted to teach King Lear had to be relevant to the everyday life of what children were facing. So you talk about real life emotions, you talk about, jealousy, whatever it is. It had to make sense, and to make sense, it had to make sense to me. And it had to make sense to the kids that I interacted with. And what I realized in my reality sphere, was that if you wanted kids to, there were so many ways of teaching. I didn't have to teach in a formal classroom. I could teach every day doing the work that I did. And I could also be the student. And just because you're 12 doesn't mean you've got nothing to teach me. And so I'm still teaching. It's just in a non-profit world. And it's not in a formal classroom. And it's very much an educational process and a two-way street between me and whoever it is that I work with. So I'm still teaching, not in a formal setting and not the way my father imagined. It's just a different way. So for me, I was talking to a friend early this morning, and I was saying, if it doesn't make sense to me, right? If it doesn't make sense to me, this is how I work, then I'm not going to do it. And this late in my life, right? Because I'm so much older than everybody else. I get to choose what I want to do, and I want to do it well. I don't want to just do it. I want to do it well, and I want to make a difference, which is why I did nonprofit. I didn't teach, like I said, in a formal setting. I changed my dissertation topic 3 times because it had to have meaning, and it had to have meaning for me and the kids that I serve, because I serve children. That's what I chose. So I can't whine about not having money. I can't whine about not having high salary. I can't whine about people, doing this. I chose this work, and I'm lucky that I get to choose to do what I like to do, really like to do. So I'm really not going to settle for anything else. This is what I want to do. And so there's nobody else to blame but me. And this is why I like to do it. Yeah.
I don't think it's blame. I think you're very blessed in that. I'm going to take one question from the audience first. Sure. This is from Al-Zahrin alias from Break the Harian. In fact, he asked, Dato, you wear a lot of hats, but which cause is the most dear to your heart?
Children, child rights. Child protection, child rights, child protection. I have to tell you, I was in, kalau nak kata nak turun padang to tengok siapa-siapa, you will see me talking to the kanak-kanak, you won't see me talking to the adults. I'm a child person, I like to talk to kids. But as I was saying earlier, I like to talk to everybody's kids, but sometimes not my own kids, because I'm with them all the time. Because it's different being a mom and being a child activist. It's not the same thing. And I'm sorry, and I say this over and over again, just because I'm a child rights person doesn't mean my kids get all the rights that I espouse for. So the closest thing to my heart is children. Selalu. Hak asasi kanak-kanak, that's my number one thing. Kanak-kanak, my number one thing. I just think no child should suffer. No child should go hungry. No child should stay out of school. No child should be discriminated against. No child should be beaten, sold, raped. End of story. That's all. And they have to be a priority in this country. It's not enough. So that's my passion.
I mean, you talk about child rights and prioritizing children. Actually, if you don't mind, I just want to touch on a topic which is actually close to my heart as well, and really this is on female empowerment. But so from your travels and what you've seen around the world, how do Malaysians stack up against other countries, other nations in terms of giving women, but especially girls, right? And because I say this because I know this, right? So especially girls, how do giving them the chance to stand up, giving them the chance to stand out, be themselves?
Well, I think, we're not Afghanistan, which is great. We could do better. We could do better. We've done better. Look at the fact that mothers, Malaysian mothers with children who have been considered stateless and born abroad now actually can be treated equally, and that mothers who have children born abroad now have an equal say in giving citizenship to their children. I think that's a step in the right direction. But at the same time, the fact that we still allow child marriage in this country is abhorrent and disgusting, and that we should not be doing this. And we know that the challenge is, tribal, feudal, not even feudal, tribal, cultural beliefs and stuff is part of the reason why we still have child marriage, because, it's a cultural thing. Or the fact that, parents think that they own children when they give birth to children, and can marry them off because, they're poor or whatever it is. It's just an excuse for me. The fact that, girls, there's still ceilings on and caps on what a girl is supposed to do and how much they can achieve is not right. And the fact that, women and young girls, there are so few of them in many of the fields and sectors, especially in corporate, I think, and government agencies. I was actually looking at our cabinet and actually trying to see where all the women were. And I think, we're still lacking in terms of, actually giving women empowerment is something that I think we can do so much better in. But the fact that girls think they belong in kitchen and that their self-esteem is tied to whether they're married or not, or whether they have a great, professional, traditional job is sad. It's sad. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I was asked to speak on career choices at a ministry meeting. And this was the tail end of the conversation on, the jobs, the kind of jobs you can get. And this girl who's from university raised her hand and said, my parents said that I don't have a boyfriend and I'm not a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. So what do I do with my life? And I'm sitting there going, oh my God, no. And then other girls within in that hall started raising their hands and said, yeah, I'm a mass communication major. And, what am I going to do? I don't have a boyfriend. And I actually said, honey, who told you you were worthless? Who told you you won't amount to much? And he said, my parents. I said, I'm sorry, with all due respect, your parents are wrong. And you are somebody, you're in university and you have these means and skills of being able to communicate and, and send the message out about empowerment, and you can do all these things on social media and you can do all these different things and that 21st century skills is all about communication and that flexibility in being able to say what it is you need to say and, and sort of present what it is you need to present in terms of content that people take years to learn. That means you're not worthless and that you're going to sound something. And I'm really sorry, and maybe it's because I'm single, you do not tie your worth to whether you get married or not. So, and this is a few years ago. So I'm sitting here going, we really need to do something about self-esteem and the fact that we tie traditional roles of women and young girls to self-worth is where we fail our girls and children and women. And we need to do so much better. And you've seen, and I was talking to you briefly about this the other day as well, that the fact that if you're going to give microcredit loans or soft loans to groups, right, give the single mothers, because it's the single mothers who are going to feed that family. I'm sorry, case by case proven. It's the women who are going to raise that child and raise that family. Not necessarily the men, but for sure the women. So, we need to support single mothers a lot more. We need to support young girls a lot more. We can tell girls if they want to draw their, Japanese comic series, manga, whatever it is, they can actually make a profession out of it. And creativity and imagination is there for the taking. Take it. do whatever it is. And you don't always have to be a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer to be successful in life. There are loads of other ways of measuring success and measuring intelligence, right? So yeah, we can do better.
Yeah. I mean, Tini, I'm sure if you were in a hall, everyone will be clapping their hands right now. But are we focusing on the wrong things? You know, like sanitary pads and have we?
Focusing on this one thing. The truth of the matter is nobody talks about sanitary pads and period poverty. That's the truth of the matter. We should be talking about that because so many girls don't know how to talk and discuss, period poverty. And the fact that, you know what, I'm sorry, I wasn't going to bring in sex education, but how many parents actually talk to their children about sex education? I will tell you what I did, right? And I'm a proponent of child rights. I actually took books and put it on the table because my kids refused to have this conversation with me, refused. And I was too embarrassed and shy, I admit, to actually sit down with them like, please, can we talk about this? When, we should. We don't have the conversations we're supposed to have to protect our children. It isn't about, and getting past that embarrassment of talking about period poverty or sex education or birds and the bees and all this kind of stuff, conversations we need to have. Why? Because we've got huge issues on, baby dumping, on teenage sex in pregnancies. We don't talk to children enough about relationships. We don't have conversations, at least I don't, but I'm a child activist, right? So, we need to get past those taboos in our head and the cultural traditions that we have so that we better protect our children. When policies and all said protection of children or services for children begins at home, that's what it means as well. And I'm sorry, I also am not very good at that, right? Then expect the community to do it. But the community only comes in when the parents do their job, right? Or can't do their job. So we need to have better conversations with our children too, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think this is where everyone can do their part. Right? I mean, your own children as well, your own children. Let's again going through. I think I'm just looking at the list of the questions.
Yeah.
How do you maintain? Okay, so this is a question from Masnita Misirat. Thank you, Dato, for your ongoing efforts to zero hunger. I believe you have seen a lot of heartbreaking conditions on the ground. How do you maintain your passion and belief that things can be improved and community can be empowered? How do you maintain your passion? What drives you?
One child at a time, one community at a time. So this morning, virtually, we were doing food distributions to about 100 families in Sabah right now in Kampung Cendrawata Likas, Kampung Likas. We're handing out food, and I think some of our friends over in Sabah are sending food over to Pulau Gaya, and there's initiatives every day with the floods and stuff. We do it, or I try to pat myself on the back once, not all, many times, once, because we helped 100 families, right? So 100 families is about 500 to 600 people. You take it one step at a time. You take the small wins one at a time. For me, it's very simple. I say I'm a child activist. I'm passionate about child rights. If you want to protect children, you have to protect the parents. You have to protect the community. If the community has no food, you're not protecting the children. Very simple. So if I espouse and say, this is what I believe, then you need to do it. And my measure of success is one child at a time, which is why the Yayasan Chow Kit's motto is every child matters, because it's one child, one family, one set of parents at a time. And that's how you don't go crazy. That's how you keep your passion. And I tend to like to keep in touch with all the families and children that I work with. So I have 2 phones now to be able to keep in touch with everyone. Yeah, I finally gave in, got 2 phones.
So I think that's it. But this leads then to a question here from Dato Sharon. Okay, you started Yayasan Chow Kit when society was far more intolerant. What was it like at that time, trying to convince donors and others to support the cause?
It was like it was like I was in a war. It actually feels now a little bit like how it was when I started Chow Kit. There were people shooting bullets at me, literally not bullets, but literally asking me on TV, and it was a religious group actually, who I hadn't even started. I just said I was going to go help children. Chow Kit was saying, you were so irresponsible. How could you take away the responsibility of parents and let them dump their children? And how can you encourage and pick up babies? That is encouraging kerja maksiat. I mean, they were like live TV, you know, fights with people. I felt like I was in a guerrilla warfare with babies, literally in my arms, going to you know, pick up babies in makeshift baby carriages and bringing them back. You know, I used to walk into restaurants with babies on the way back to finding a home or couldn't find a home for a child. It was like a war. And it was scary because there was no advocacy in places, no laws affecting certain marginalized groups of children. The police would look at me and you know, and say, did you take this child? Where did you get this child? And JKM would be yelling at me because they said, oh, yeah, I'm taking over their work or making them look bad. And it wasn't about them, right? And you know, and then, so there was so many angles in which people were attacking us, right, for the work that we're doing. We may think we're doing good, but to other groups who were like embarrassing them, taking away responsibility from parents, etc., and all that kind of stuff. But really, it wasn't about me or them. It was really about what is best for this child at this point in time. Moving on now, like I said, we have more people in place, more systems in place, looking at laws, changing things. People don't attack me as much as other people to attack, you know. But again, now during the pandemic, it feels like a war as well, because of that urgency, because we're in new territory, looking at large numbers of people, you know, needing help, running from place to place all the time, picking up the phone all the time. It's exactly the way it was 15 years ago, nonstop. You know, literally, I would run up the stairs with babies, hand them over to the staff, run back down and pick up another child from another area. That's how it was. It feels like that now, except I don't physically have to pick up the child. I can just refer them to someone else who can look after the child. But the cases get back and forth, half an hour, everything. So in many ways, it's changed for the better, but in many ways, there's more help needed and more people needing help and more children needing help. And we've got different issues now. We've got mental health, we've got virtual sexual abuse, we've got bullying, we've got trafficking, we got forced labor because so many parents are asking their children to work and not go to school. We have different kinds of issues coming up, and the xenophobia is crazy. Xenophobia against non-Malaysian refugees is crazy. So yeah, different and similar problems. So yeah.
Yeah.
I hope I answered that question.
No, I think as they say, I mean, when you mention xenophobia, I'm thinking about, you know, of course, we talk about keluarga in Malaysia, for example, and, you know, I believe keluarga in Malaysia, my interpretation of it is that it should be inclusive rather than exclusive, you know, but yeah. I mean, just on that, I mean, this thing, and I think you touched on it earlier about children born overseas.
Children what? Sorry?
Children born overseas to Malaysian mothers, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and of course, this is going through the system. But do you think this is something that might, you know, if we let it go, it could be a social problem? It could give rise to problem in 5-10 years time, bite us in the backside.
Well, the issue on statelessness has been there for years, right? So we talked about 6 months ago, I was carrying papers for Malaysian mothers in Singapore who couldn't get their children back here to register as Malaysians, right? So the issue again, because they were born abroad, the husband is French, whatever it is, not being able to come back to Malaysia because they have their citizenship. They have no citizenship or Malaysian citizenship. So I used to have to shuffle back and forth with documents to give to KDN. But, you know, I think the good news after yesterday was that the Home Minister actually says that they're looking at amending the federal constitution to ensure that you know, it ensures that mothers have equal rights as men in terms of giving citizenship, right? But, you know, that I'm not a lawyer, so I cannot talk about the federal constitution much, but my question is, you know, why was this in the beginning, and is this about interpretation or actually what was in the federal constitution? That's one of the things that, you know, I'm worried about. And the fact is this going to be retrospective so that now all the mothers who couldn't get their children's citizenship can now get their children's citizenship? And what if the children is above 18 years old? What if they're 21? What if they're 22? You know, my nephew is 22 and he was born abroad, you know, and he doesn't have Malaysian citizenship. So does it mean now he can get Malaysian citizenship? So, I mean, I think there are loads of questions on the impact, whether it's going to be retrospectively implemented. And, you know, and the Home Minister saying, okay, we're going to have to do this. And I'm like, okay, but how? But was it there in the beginning? You know, these are questions I think that we have to do. But I think it's a step in the right direction because KDN never gives in, to actually admit that, you know, that Malaysian mothers actually have a right to give citizenship, right? But because also in this country, depending on the situation, citizenship is not a right in this country. Citizenship, if you talk to KDN in certain circumstances, is considered a privilege because it's not automatic. So let's see how this plays out.
Okay.
But I'm glad it's going to happen. I'm glad because now we can take away one category of statelessness, so now we only have 9 instead of 10. So, yeah. It's been a long time.
One child at a time, one
situation, one issue at a time. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Again, there are so many questions coming in, Tini. From Norli Ismail, how can we as individuals play a greater role in this whole scheme of things?
There are students out there, right? You said there were university students.
Yes.
So, you know, I do, so I have my lab, which is child rights, but my day job is as a resource mobilization and fundraising consultant, right? That's what I do. And
it's a nice word, right?
Yeah, it's a fancy word for basically go and cherry do it. But there are lots of ways to get what you need, right? The support that you need. The traditional way is money, always money, because you need money to pay staff. I'm reminded of that today, staff, you have to pay operation costs and you have to do all these things. And that's the number one things, especially in nonprofit world, that nobody likes to cover, right? Donors don't like to pay for operational costs. But there are other ways which I think are just as important. Volunteerism. So that's for all the university students out there, volunteer your time, volunteer your brains, volunteer your contacts, volunteer, you know, strategy meetings, sitting down, looking at issues that you are concerned with and are invested in, get a group together, go volunteer, figure it out, then get mentors to help you to work on the issue. In kind is very good. So, you know, if you're not going to give money, then you have to give, then you can give food supplies, right? Or you can arrange for different things, but there's logistic costs and all these kind of things. But there's in kind, and there's volunteerism, and there's money. And for me, I think also if you don't contextualize it, whatever the issue is, because the problem with, and I say this about a lot of issues all over the world, is that we don't take the time to contextualize the effort that we're doing to the community at large. We tend to adopt a one-size-fits-all for everybody, like everybody's poor, everybody needs this, right? Or everybody needs that. And the truth is, it's not true. So yes, basic needs, everybody needs food, everybody needs shelter, everybody needs housing, everybody needs toilets. That part is true, but everything else, it depends on what the community needs are and what the person wants. So you can't take offensive, you know, if someone says, no, I don't want that, I want something else, because that's what they need. So one size fits all doesn't work. Volunteerism is really, really good. I think we can cut costs and be more efficient when more people actually are willing to do and commit, and commitment is the word. Because gotong royong is not the same as volunteerism, yeah? Gotong royong is touch points. You go in, you do something, you get out, you forget. Volunteerism is a lifestyle. You actually do things because it matters, you're actually invested in it, and you are committed to doing it over and over again. When you volunteer and you're committed to doing an issue, whether it's planting plants once a month in a garden, you will, within a year, get plant a whole entire garden, right? With other people. that's commitment. So I think we need, you know, for the students out there, volunteerism is key, and commitment and doing it repeatedly is key. You know, what I'm realizing in doing this food aid to the poor is that you cannot do one-offs, you know, and that's another thing. You give people food one time, you're like, I gave food to the poor. I'm like, what about next week? And the week after? It's 18 months, yeah? People have lost their jobs. They haven't found their jobs back 18 months down the road, which means they still need food. How long are you going to cap it? They're like, oh, we can't, you know, feed people, poor people for the rest of their lives. They need to get jobs, which is why I say you need a multi-pronged approach to looking at how you do food aid, right? At some point, you have to transitional out into food sovereignty and empowering them, making sure they get jobs and all this stuff, and then looking at, you know, growing their own garden or doing other stuff as well, right? So they have to ease out of getting subsidies and handout and getting actually being able to grow the food by themselves. So, you know, that's what I mean by a different approach. That you don't do charity, please, I hate that word. Nobody does charity. Charity is that 1 ringgit that you give the beggar. That's charity, you forget about it the next time. What you're looking at is looking at ways to really support and empower communities. And to do that, at some point, you've got to give them the skills and everything they need to be able to do it themselves. And that is not charity. That is your social impact, social investment kind of work that you do. And that's the kind of work that, you know, I'd like to aim to do more of. That it's not needs-based, then it moves towards like a rights-based supporting, just, you know, having strategy meetings and stuff and doing that stuff and saying, you have all the tools, we can just help guide you, but you do it yourself. So that's where we should be aiming for.
I think there's a bit of a mindset shift required there as well, but
yes.
certainly
yes,
see where
sure.
you're coming from.
Please stop, stop saying charity. Nobody does charity. Please don't do charity. Yeah.
Commitment. Yeah? Commitment, I think is the keyword that I got from that. I mean, Tini, you definitely you said things have improved over the 20 years that you've been doing this, and I think I
don't get thrown in jail. You mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have the data for that from your work with Yayasan Chow Kit and others. But especially I think I'm linking this to a question from Dato Sharon again. I mean, have things improved? Have things gotten better for city kids? I mean,
no. I think things in urban areas have not improved in many ways because we have not addressed issues past basic rights. But having said that, it's the same for rural kids, right? We say, oh, if you have food, shelter, education, health, water, this thing, you're fine. No, that's to survive. That's not to thrive. That's not going to get you out, and that's not going to contribute to your upward social mobility. That's just to survive. That's not being competitive. That's not making sure that, you know, if your job is to be, if you get a job as a mechanic, that's where you're going to be 40 years later. How is that upward social mobility? That's just to make sure you can support yourself and maybe a small family. That's not to make sure you do well in life. I think for kids in urban areas, even rural, we've got to get past basic needs. We've got to make sure that if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of theory, right, that hierarchy pyramid, food, shelter, education, health stuff is at the bottom. And then you start talking about critical thinking skills and you start talking about innovation, creativity and stuff. There is no room for that. People are busy trying to eat right now, right? And people are busy trying to get back in school and getting onto online education. Kids have lost their school education for 2 years. We're just surviving. Everybody's surviving. So no, we haven't got past basic rights and basic needs. And so we're not going to thrive this way. That's just the bleak side of looking at things, but that's the truth. I think if you're doing well in school and you come from middle upper class or even a lower class, but you have parents who care and you can do things, you're going to succeed, you're going to succeed. But the truth of the matter is, if you're not going to succeed, or you're a late bloomer like me, for example, you're going to have very few opportunities to thrive. You're just going to survive and just cruise. So it's very important, I think, to open up the space for children to thrive, to find different platforms to express themselves, to try out new ideas, to get the support and mentorship that they want, to stop traditional ways of looking at what success is. All these things will help children thrive, not just survive. And urban kids, we've got the internet. Okay, rural kids, we have no internet. Monitoring what they're seeing, who they're talking to, what they're looking at, finding the space to be able to talk about whatever it is that they're doing and facilitating those discussions because it's safe. It's really important. It's quite scary what's going on in terms of you're looking at different ways of trafficking or sexual abuse or, different kinds of exploitation. It's scary nowadays. Especially for kids in urban areas. But like I said, rural area kids also have their issues, yeah. And it's and poverty, some people say urban poverty is worse than rural poverty. I don't know, right now at the pandemic, both are just as bad. Both are just as bad. So no, I don't think we've improved. We're just getting past basic rights for a lot of people. And now we have this whole group of people who've fallen into B40, like, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
I mean, this ties in what you said earlier is, I mean, there's no, I mean, you have to contextualize. There's no cookie cutter solution, for example, to a lot of problems. But, unfortunately, government doesn't do this very well, right? And I would, let's not just say our government. I mean, all governments in the world, the way governments are designed is to roll out mass solutions.
Yeah.
You find yourself in contention with the government a lot. I mean, you are invited to the ministry.
I'm always in contention with someone. I'm always contentious, right?
Since school days. Since your school days.
Since forever, since I was 6 years old. I'm always contentious. Yeah, I think many of the ministries and agencies could do a hell of a lot better. I just swore online. But they can.
Do you get the feeling, or does anyone say to you, you're making the government look bad?
I always get that all the time. Less so now.
Okay,
but I think we could do so much better. I think the ministries can do a lot better than what they're doing. Approving and nodding your head and saying, yes, Malaysian mothers have the right to give citizenship to their children. That was a right a long time ago. That's nothing new. But the fact that, the ministry should be doing more than that was their job from the beginning, yeah? That's part of the scope. They should be protecting, women, children, communities from the beginning. Saying it now doesn't make you progressive. You're saying the obvious. What are you doing about it? That would make it. Not even progressive, that would be doing your job. They're not doing their job. They should do a lot better. You look at, again, I'm going back to food distribution, right? You've got a data list, government data list, that has been the same data list for the last 20 years, right? You pick up new names because, people make emergency phone calls, and yet you don't address the issue that single mothers out there in Kelantan and Terengganu have lost their jobs, have 5 children, husbands have left them, and they can't walk to your center to go register to get aid. You need to go to them. They have no money for transport. They have no money to put where to put their children. They have no money for food. They have no money. You expect them to walk to your center to go and register for food. How silly is that, right? You haven't expanded your database. You haven't done your screening processes. You don't ask the right questions. Your criteria of who is poor is so ridiculous. It's not even funny. Kalau ada Astro, nampaknya awak kaya. Yeah, is the Astro working? Kalau ada peti sejuk, awak ada, then you're okay. Did you know that the peti sejuk is used as a cupboard? There's no electricity.
Yeah.
Come on, you need to re-look and re-examine on what your criteria. Makan 3 kali sehari doesn't mean you're rich. Makan 3 sekali, makan apa? Roti canai bagi 4 is not a meal. Yeah. So we need to re-look and re-examine that. Data kat sini tak sama dengan data kat Baitumal tak sama. I'm like, can you just please coordinate and share your data so that you all are on the same page, because you're missing entire communities. Oh, orang Malaysia dapat makan, orang tak Malaysia tak makan. Huh? Orang Malaysia are not humans, is it? They don't get to eat.
Yeah. I mean, Tini, there's maybe, again, there are still a lot more questions being submitted by the listeners in the audience. I just maybe want to end on one, and maybe this is a big wish. Then this is from Amanda Lopez of TV3. What initiatives, efforts, and policies would you like to see coming out of the budget 2022? And this is, as you know, we are building up to the announcement very soon.
Well, for budget 2022, of course, better distribution and access to food and health for all in Malaysia. That would be my wish list. And that if you don't want to give all in Malaysia, then let the NGOs and civil society lead with making sure that everybody in Malaysia gets their food and access to health. That's number one. Number two, the fact that we still have issues on online and access to education for all children, that is ridiculous, right? So we'd love to see how all children in Malaysia could have the same equal access to education as well. The fact that, that I would really love, and this is not political, this is the honest truth, we need a Ministry of Children. We really, really do. Children needs and children rights are unique to children. It cannot be lumped with mothers, and it cannot be lumped with communities, even though there's a link. Children need their own special protections. Children need their own special rights and their own special platform. I really, really, where does it say the Ministry of Women, Family and Community Development? It doesn't say children at all, which means that children are not a priority. I really, really wish we could have a Ministry of Children or a Department of Children separately, so that we can address child rights and child protection and child services, so that children don't think of committing suicide 10 times a day, so that children don't get locked in their rooms during this pandemic because the mother suffers from depression and the father is separated somewhere else. I don't want children to kneel and beg me for food. I don't want that.
Yeah.
So I would really love that for the budget. Please, can we start looking at providing money so that we have a Ministry of Children? That's number one. And food and health and education, please. More for that.
Wow. Okay, I think with that, I mean, Tini, we've exceeded our time already.
Really?
Very thankful.
The time just flew.
Thank you for your time.
Not at all. Thank you, Farouk.
Thank you, everyone, to all of the audience, everyone here listening, and the contributors, of comments and questions. I hope you found this as enlightening and as inspiring as I have. I think so many takeaways I got from that. One child at a time, and I'm tired of waiting. Let's go.
Yeah.
So certainly, there's so much that we can do, and I think, as you said, the communities are stepping up, but there's certainly much more that we can do, and especially our commitment to helping everyone, but in particular prioritizing children. Let's make Malaysia a safer place for all children. I think that's something that we want to take away with us. So once again, thank you very much to all of the audience. Thank you especially to Yang Berbahagia, Dato Dr. Tini.
Thank you, Farah.
Today. And if you allow me to vandalize the hashtag once more, kita jaga anak-anak kita. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Farah. Thank you, MIDF. Bye.